All right. Well, this is episode session 14 of Roaming Free Inside the Cage. And glad that you're all here. And if you are watching the archive recordings, welcome as well. And if you'd ever like to join us live, we'd love to have you. And all the details that you'll need are in the notes below. So just take a look there and feel free to join us anytime. The rest of us, what we're going to be doing is we're going to be starting on page 10 tonight, and we're starting the next section of chapter 1. This is a really interesting section. I really enjoyed this one. I found it fascinating. We're going to be delving into, we've been talking for the last several sessions about the centers of experience, the three centers of experience. So that would be the body, the heart, and the mind, and the differences in the way that we approach just our moments, our experiences, how we process information and reality, primarily either through the body, the heart, or the mind. Now, what we're going to talk about is how did we come to have those centers of experience as our primary way of processing our lives? And what happens to us as infants to imprint us with those centers? And how does the infant even develop into this sort of experience? So it's to me, it was really interesting. Hope you'll find it that way as well. Before we dive into it, is there anything left over from last week that was a bit underdeveloped or anything that you've been thinking about and want to talk more about right now? Good. I didn't want to do any old business anyway. So, so let's start on page 10, how the centers of experience develop. Right. So we'll just read through the section and then we'll come back and we'll dig into it a little bit before we go into these three elements of infantile experience. So how the centers of experience develop. Do infants already experience life primarily through one of these three different centers? It is difficult to say with any certainty. Infants show significantly distinct temperamental styles even in the neonatal ward. Yet the tripartite division of brain functioning in the newborn is not yet clearly differentiated, for the infant's brain is still busy organizing itself for many months after birth. What accounts for the fact that adults end up with one dominant center of what accounts for the fact that adults end up with one dominant center of experience? And most important, what do the three centers have to do with the central spiritual task of reclaiming our essential nature as expressions of the one fundamental consciousness, or I? In the two sections that follow, you'll find a brief description of how infants seem to experience the world, followed by three early childhood experiences called shocks of embodiment that change their experience. For me, the transition tells a story of how our original state of innocence is transformed during early childhood into something else that we now call normal life. My hope is that this short digression will better equip you to ponder how you became your particular personality type, how it continues to function, and to what extent the automatic nature of its functioning causes you suffering. All right. Anything jump out at you? Any immediate takeaways?
There's a study that I read about early on in my studies that they did studies of infants, two different types. One is the more social, and the one who is averse to strangers. So what they found is the one would smile at somebody who comes in. These are babies, infants, maybe 2 months old, 3 months old. They get rewarded because then the adult comes and smiles back at them and go, cool, cool, cool. Whereas the one that's averse, um, tend to be avoided by the other adults. So over time, the social infant becomes even more social. And the one that is averse to others are not approached as much. So that's how meaning nature nurture and it develops that way too.
Okay. So we have some reinforcing cycles that you're talking about here,
Yeah.
obviously. So this idea, do infants already experience life primarily through one of these three different centers? So in that first few months of life, are we hardwired to have these three centers already? Or is that something more like the way Ellen is describing, is something that is nurtured into us positively or negatively by these reoccurring cycles and kind of feedback loops, if you will? And obviously, he says it's difficult to say with any certainty um, because infants do show significantly distinct temperamental styles, even in the neonatal ward, as Ellen was just talking about. But that this tripartite division of brain functioning is not clearly differentiated. And I love this line, for the infant's brain is still busy organizing itself for many months after birth. I mean, what it sounds like, and this maybe is in Eric's bailiwick, it sounds like you're still formatting the hard drive for a while, you know? I mean, think about it. You bring a new hard drive online, the first thing you have to do is formatting, and it takes a while for those partitions and everything to be set up properly. Same thing is happening in the wet works inside our noggins
Kids
as
are definitely more of a blank slate than we are, you know.
yeah. So that was just fascinating to me, the way that works. It's organizing itself for many months after birth. So the brain is busy doing that. So we can't really say with any certainty, what function is really taking place in that period of time. What accounts for what accounts, I read that wrong twice in a row. What accounts for the fact that adults end up with one dominant center of experience? And most important, what do the three centers have to do with the central spiritual task? Now, if I were to ask you, what's your central spiritual task? Would you be able to say? Since you're all here working on your spiritual task, what is your central spiritual task? Bill, you're nodding your head. Do you have a response?
Yeah, just one word, identity.
Identity. Okay. That's not a bad answer. Anyone else?
I was
Loving
thinking
each other.
I'm sorry, Scott.
Loving each other.
Loving each other. William?
I was saying connection, which I think is where Scott is.
Yeah, connection. Of course, that's if you think about it, what is identity?
Mhm.
It's connection, right?
Mhm.
Any other ideas?
Letting go of my ego
Letting go of your ego.
because I
Okay.
hang on to it
Mhm.
so much.
I hear that.
Yeah.
So what does William Schafer say? He says our central spiritual task is reclaiming our essential nature. Now that's interesting. Now that's related to identity, obviously. It's going to be related to loving and connection as well. It's going to be related to letting go of our ego. But I think if you really nail it down to the ground zero, the bottom of the dog pile, reclaiming our essential nature as expressions of the one fundamental consciousness or I.
Yeah.
When you think about Jesus' teaching, what is he always telling us that we've got to do? And what is the Eucharist all about? And I know I've talked about this before, but the original Greek term for Eucharist was anamnesis, which means unforgetting, which I think is even more powerful than remembering. To unforget who we really are is what the communion is all about. To be able to reclaim our essential identity, our essential nature, to cut through everything that we have learned that is obscuring that identity from ourselves, of which the ego is the main culprit, right? I mean, we process everything through the ego. We see our identity as a function of the ego and our roles and accomplishments and our attributes and so on and so forth. So to cut through all that is to reclaim our essential nature as expressions of the one fundamental consciousness or I. When Jesus expresses his identity most clearly, he says, I and the Father are one. So his identity is only understandable at all through the Father's identity. Once he understood the Father and understood that he was connected to the Father, then he could understand something about his own identity. And he's very clear about that. He says, I don't do anything on my own initiative. I don't do anything except what I hear from the Father. And so he saw himself as basically just an extension, you know, in the way that the son was the extension of the king in that culture. If the king sent his son out and you were addressing the king's son, it was as if the king were standing before you. The son was imbued with all of that power and all of that authority. And so you addressed the son the way that you would address the king. The son was in essence the avatar of the king. And Jesus would be the avatar of his Father in heaven. And that was his identity. That was his essential nature. Every single one of us needs to do the same thing. On Sunday, we talked about Michelangelo's horse, right? That when he was commissioned to do a new sculpture, he would walk around the block of marble until he could envision the entire sculpture finished inside, standing inside the block of stone. And then all that was left to do was remove everything that wasn't the horse, wasn't the finished sculpture. That is our spiritual task, is to remove everything that is not our essential nature, is not the kingdom person that is already standing within us. And Jesus is also very clear. You're never going to find kingdom somewhere out there by looking for it. It's already within. And so that's where the treasure is. But in order to realize the treasure, we have to sell everything we have and then buy the field where the treasure resides. So it's all that imagery that he uses is all boiling down to really the same thing. The central spiritual task is reclaiming our essential nature. Yes, who is speaking?
It was me.
Oh, go ahead, Doug.
Yeah, one thing caught my attention on all this too is it kind of ends the paragraph how you become your particular personality type, how it continues to function, and to what extent the automatic nature of its functioning causes you suffering. And I guess if you're buried in your ego, you say, "What's suffering?" It's like I guess you have to suffer to be. Why are we doing this? And I was thinking, suffering. Am I suffering? Am I suffering because of my false identity or whatever you want to call it? I just thought that was interesting. Kind of
Doug, he actually addresses that right at the bottom of the page. In fact, let's just read ahead since you brought it up. Look at the bottom of page 11. He says, indeed, you see the word indeed, 4 lines up. Indeed, we are so accustomed to living like this that we rarely notice that anything is wrong. Sometimes when the internal voices grow raucous, attacking us or attacking our loved ones, when the boredom grows so intense we cannot bear to wait for tomorrow, or when the hopelessness lies so heavily upon us that we can no longer even contemplate tomorrow, then we know something is wrong. So he's addressing exactly what you've said. We are so used to living this way. We are so much inside our bubble that until it gets so out of balance, we just count it as normal life, normal adult life. But what he's going to do, he's going to draw this bright line between the infant and the adult, the way the infant is processing in those first few months of life, and the way we grow to process as adults, which negates everything that we had as infants. And our essential nature is going to be couched in the type of presence and joy and awareness that the infant possesses naturally. But you made the same point that he made a little bit later, Doug. So I just wanted to.
Yeah, I didn't read it, but it did jump out at me when he said, because of your suffering. I go, wait, I'm suffering? I thought I was okay. Oh, no.
Well, let's face it. Until we realize we're suffering, we're not going to make any changes, are we?
No,
right? If we think
we're
we're making it, if we think this is normal life, then we are going to continue on. It's only when, the real world mugs us and breaks through, and then we realize, this is not right. There's something wrong here. I don't want to live like this. Till we know it's broke, we're not going to fix it.
Can I say something?
Of course.
It might be inappropriate, but
oh, we like our inappropriate.
I was just thinking about how we could call it the gift of desperation. How in the old time churches that I grew up in, Church of Christ, stuff like that, everybody was always in this, I think maybe a little bit phony stage of desperation. Because we're all sinners in the hands of an angry God, and we're all just like wailing and
Mhm.
I feel like unless you really get to that place, you're just pretending a faith that hasn't really kicked in.
Mm.
I lived that for a long time, you know, just as I am without one plea, but I didn't believe it, not for a second. And so until I really kind of had a sense that I had failed, that my way had failed, and I was going down hard, I just couldn't, I couldn't see it. I couldn't see that I was a sinner,
Mm.
whatever we want to call that. I think it answers it in this chapter a little bit.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yep, that's a perfect point, Lori. Absolutely.
Yeah.
You know, blessed is he who is at the end of his rope, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Mm.
And if you're faking it and you're sitting in church in a pew, just, you know, but you don't really get, you know, to that end of the road. It's a kind of an uncomfortable state.
Yeah, it's interesting you just said that, William. That's the way that Eugene Peterson translates the first beatitude.
Oh, wow.
Is that what you were quoting? Did you know that? Or were you quoting for something else?
Something else.
Okay. Yeah,
Or
but
Peterson was quoting him.
if you read the message and Eugene Peterson's translation is blessed are those who are at the end of their rope.
Yeah.
So it's just interesting that you use that phrase.
There are no atheists in foxholes either.
Right.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
But this is true. I mean, the hero's journey always begins with a wounding, right? You know, the rite of passage always begins with the separation, the breaking of the bonds that we are used to. The familiar world goes away. And so Jesus is talking the same kind of language. You know, if you want to be found, then you have to become lost. You have to pick up your cross daily, deny yourself. So it is that breaking of the familiar, and it is that traumatic realization that there is something that needs to be investigated or something that is wrong here. There's some hurt that needs to be healed. And until we feel that keenly enough, you know, our pain there's that saying in recovery, we progress at the pace of pain. You know, absolutely so true. And until our pain outweighs our fear, then we don't move. There's too much inertia there. And so all of this is part and parcel to it.
Well,
It has
Dave,
to be authentic. Absolutely, Lori. It has to be authentic, or we just are playing, or like I like the way that Thomas Merton said, we're making contemplative faces at ourselves in the mirror. Not really going anywhere. I'm sorry, Doug. What were you going to say?
No, it's kind of on Lori's things, throwing out a crazy thing is, I think our church or gathering, you know, we do have a lot of people that come from some broken situations, you know, recovery. And I don't know, maybe I'm wrong, but I do think that it seems the people are a little more authentic because they're kind of like, well, yeah, my son's doing this, or we come from some trauma or whatever. So I maybe it's just my own experience. I've been sensing a little less phoniness because you kind of like everybody has their baggage and they're open with it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think a lot of it comes from the fact that we started out as a recovery ministry. So when you're in recovery ministry, I mean, if you just show up in the parking lot, everybody knows why you're there, right? There's no hiding it. And it's not like on a typical Sunday community church where everybody is playing at being okay and dressed well and perfect and all that. Hey, we're there because we're broken. And so I think that tradition is carried on even as the church has morphed more into a second half of life church. Still half of our body is actively in recovery of one type or another. And so that kind of tradition, that mindset is carried on. And I agree, it's just essential if we're ever going to get any work done. We have to admit our powerlessness. So.
And the irony of showing up to church and trying to clean up and look like you got it all together and, you know, present a certain way.
Yeah. Fourth step helps with that.
I remember the first pastor that I was under in the evangelical church, he used to say, you don't clean your fish before you catch them. I always liked that line.
That's good.
Yeah, not bad, huh? Some old folksy wisdom there. Okay, so to get back to the text, you know, the two questions, what accounts for the fact that adults end up with one dominant center of experience? So how does that happen out of the infant? And most important, what do the three centers have to do with the central spiritual task of reclaiming our essential nature as expressions of the one fundamental consciousness, or I? Remembering that the three centers are processing through body, heart, or mind, okay? In the two sections that follow, you'll find a brief description of how infants seem to experience the world. How do infants actually experience the world? Followed by three early childhood experiences called shocks of embodiment that change their experience. For me, the transition tells a story of how our original state of innocence is transformed during early childhood into something else that we now call normal life. My hope is that the short digression will better equip you to ponder, one, ponder how you became your particular personality type. Two, how it continues to function, how your personality type continues to function in your life. And three, to what extent the automatic nature of its functioning causes you suffering. Okay? And obviously, if it doesn't cause suffering, then it's not broke. You don't fix it. If you don't yet know it causes suffering, then you won't fix it. But if it's limiting you, if it's not healthy for you, it's going to show up and it's going to escalate. And if you are paying attention, you will start to realize that there is something that needs to be done and a change that needs to occur. So let's dig in. Three elements of infantile experience. We can begin by describing the three elements of infant experience, elements that can easily be observed during the first 2 years of life, but that are often overlooked or misunderstood. I call them presence, joy, and awareness of others' awareness. That third one is interesting, right? Awareness of others' awareness. So that's not just being aware, but it's being aware that others are aware, and that you can both be aware of the same thing, and how that changes the nature of the relationship and the dynamic between you. But being aware of others' awareness really is the hallmark of self-awareness, of the human experience, as opposed to any other animal on Earth. Okay, so we're going to take them in order. Presence is the first one. The first element is the quality of presence, because it appears in experience prior to any thought or concept. Presence cannot be defined in words. So here we are back to something that's ineffable, right? But I love the way he puts it. Because presence appears in experience prior to any thought or concept, the infant doesn't have the ability to form a concept, doesn't have the ability to form words yet. Remember, the hard drive is still formatting here. Presence cannot be defined in words. It is that presence to oneself without which nothing else could be present. Okay, think about that line for a second. It is that presence to oneself without which nothing else could be present. It is pure awareness, bare of all internal commentaries, judgments, comparisons, fears, or desires. Such is the awareness I observe in a calmly alert newborn, whose tiny body sometimes seems reduced to just a pair of eyes, totally absorbed in sights that are still fresh, unlabeled, that's a great term, and unburdened by the weight of prior experience. I am tempted to say that such an infant is not only present, but that he is an embodiment of presence itself. Okay, that is a huge paragraph. So let's go back for a sec. Presence cannot be defined in words because it appears in experience prior to any thought or concept in the infant. It is that presence to oneself without which nothing else could be present. Does that make sense to you?
Can you reread it?
It is that presence to oneself without which nothing else could be present.
To me, that comes across as like, you know, I don't know, like today, in the modern age, with this whole idea of like mindfulness, we might be taking a walk and describing in words what we're seeing and what we're hearing and what we're feeling. And yet at the same time, in accordance with this, it's really is kind of suggesting that that isn't really true presence, but the infant has the presence. And what we now do is we ascribe labels to things through the filter of our mind based on the way that we've been shaped from our experiences, and however that occurs. But it's just an interesting, like the bare essence of presence is without words or judgment in any way. We're not creating a narrative or anything like that. And so I guess it just begs, for me, then in my attempt for mindfulness and presence, how would I go about doing that without attempting to necessarily describe it in words, what I'm sensing.
Were you asking the question at the end there, Sarah?
Yeah.
How would you do that?
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right on in terms of how you're reading the quality of presence we're talking about here. And the answer to the question, of course, is contemplative practice. Everything about contemplative practice is trying to bring us back to that very state of presence, right? Did anyone else have a comment on that line before I comment anymore?
Dave, I just
Yeah.
wonder if it begs the question, though, of how we can ever get back to that purest of a state.
Mm-hmm.
Because we all have experiences and memories, and it almost feels like it's not attainable in that pure of a form.
Yeah,
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Dave, can I piggyback on that? Last night on Instagram, I saw this she must have been a 2-year-old girl, and they put glasses on her for the first time.
Yeah.
I don't know if any of you have seen that. She's just looking at the people around her with that innocent. I mean, it really is innocent, right? But like what Becky is saying, depending on the reaction of the people that she's looking at is going to really inform and shape and mold she may carry forward from that point. So I'm not sure you can undo all the experiences myself. I question that same thing. Almost impossible because you're at such a young developing age at that age, but you're totally innocent. So you have no control over what the reactions are of the people around her. And of course, they're all smiling when they see her all of a sudden just light up.
All right, we've got 2 skeptics among us.
But that little girl is extremely vulnerable to whatever that environment is that's around her.
Bill.
Yeah.
Bill P.
Part of my job is teaching people how to be present without thought. And I always laugh because mindset is all about using the mind to change your mind, which I guess might work, but I find it much more rewarding to be able to be present. And it's really hard, but it's doable. I've watched so many adults do it. It's really beautiful when it happens.
Yeah, I would say starting with just focusing on our 5 senses, right? Like just hearing, just feeling, just tasting, right? Without really thinking about it too much, right? Like it's like we're hardwired to be present to our experience, right? And I don't know if it takes me completely out of this linguistic place, but absolutely there are times when you can eat something and not be thinking about anything, like it's just that good.
What's that awe that Dave talks about?
Numinous awe.
Yeah. Like that experience is a presence experience.
I think you can get there in snippets, like moments,
Mhm.
but to have that, the kind of embodied presence of that infant,
Mm.
given that our minds are data collectors. So there's no way to get rid of all that data, but you can have moments, I think, of it. And I guess that's the best we're going for. But there is something beautiful about observing an infant um, in that state. You
Takes
can
your
just
mind off
see,
it a little bit, right?
yes, yeah, and you can just see them kind of taking it all in, but without any thought about it. It's pretty amazing.
Mm.
Becky, when I observe people doing that very active behavior, being very focused and present, it becomes a beautiful thing in most cases.
Mm.
You know what was interesting when I was with Linda Georgie after she was back in the hospital and she was completely unreachable by language at that point. And there were moments where she was looking up into ceiling and looking into the corners of the room. And I remember I would bend close to her and say, "What are you seeing right now?" I was just I wanted to know because she was looking out the way a newborn infant would look out. There was this wonder. Her eyes were wide open and she was looking at things. And of course, I'm looking up and there's nothing there that I can see. But she was in that same kind of space. I don't know if her mind at that point was capable of forming words anymore, after all that her and body had been through. But I think it's exactly the way that you're talking about, Becky. We don't want to return to the infant, or we're just going to be drooling in the corner and someone has to change us. I mean, that's not what we're trying to do here, right?
Oh, good.
We are now adults and we have to process the world through language and through our egoic interface. I mean, our ego is the interface with the rest of the world. And so we need that. We need to use that. But what we want to do is balance that. So I look at presence like a pearl necklace. It's not one thing. It's just I put a pearl on a string, and that pearl represents a moment of pure presence, a moment of pure mindfulness, a moment where we achieve that loss, complete dissolution of ego, and we are just present the way the infant is. And then we pass through that moment and we come back into ego and we do what we need to do. And then we put another one on and another one. Eventually, you've got a necklace, which means that we are characterized by presence, even though we are oscillating in and out of it, which we have to do. So no, it is not possible for an adult human to be completely in presence 100% of the time, unless there's something wrong with them, I suppose.
Lobotomy.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, maybe that's the beauty of Down syndrome children. Maybe they are able to be in that presence all the time because even when they're 30 years old and they still have that innocence and you feel that there's something so beautiful about them, but they can't interface with the world in the fullness of human sentience either. And so we are trying to get the best of both worlds. We want to return back to the garden, back to the place where we don't know that we're naked and that we can walk with the Lord in the cool of the evening with that pure presence. But we're doing it now volitionally. The child has no choice. Their brains aren't developed enough. That's all they can do. But we can use them as the guide of what it looks like. And we can come back to those places, but then we're going to have to come back out again. And there's that oscillation. But that creates the balance that allows us to be able to process spiritually, even through the egoic interface. And we become detached from the ego. We no longer identify it with it. It is the tool that we use, but it is not us. There is a deeper us that we have experienced now, and we can balance. So yeah, it's going to be like that. So don't think that we are trying to completely get back to 100% presence in the way that we're defining it here, because that doesn't work.
David, I need
Yes.
to say goodbye. I need to go.
Oh, are you okay? Are you hurting?
Yeah, hurting a lot.
I'm so sorry, honey.
Sorry.
Thank you. Really
Okay.
enjoyed being here.
We'll take
Very
whatever
nice to
we can
meet
get,
you.
Sharon, okay?
Thank you.
All
Good
right.
night, Sharon.
Good night, dear.
All right, and I feel better.
Thank you.
Mm.
Okay, so I just love the way that he said that. All right. So presence to oneself without which nothing else can be present. So here's the deal. If we are still sitting inside our ego, if we are still labeling everything, remember those sensory walks we talked about? You go out and you take a walk, and everything you're keenly attuned to everything your five senses are bringing in. And you take your senses one at a time, starting with sight usually, and you see a tree, but you don't say tree in your mind. You don't say, oh, that's a sycamore. You just look at it as a shape, as color, the outline against the sky or whatever it has, but you don't assign anything to it. You're just experiencing it as purely as you can, as if you were for the first time or as if an infant would. And then same thing with hearing and feeling and so on and so forth. That kind of presence allows us to be present to whatever it is that's sharing the moment with us. But as soon as we label something, now we put the barrier between us and it. It's now subject, object, and it stands at arm's length. And now really all we're processing is what's in our mind. It's like taking a snapshot of the hummingbird and you're looking at the snapshot, but the bird is long gone. You know, you're no longer present to the event. You're present to what you're holding, that after image. And it's static. It's no longer alive. It's no longer moving. And so that's what we're talking about. The kind of presence that allows us to be present to something else is the presence that is pure enough that we're not thinking about it. And, you know, like William's meal, he's so present to that food that he's not thinking about it anymore.
And I like what Bill put in the chat there, like listening to music, right? Like there are times when you're so caught up in the music that there are no thoughts in your head. You're just hearing what you're hearing and swept away by it.
I have to put the chats up. Music. Yeah, there it is. Okay, I see it. All right. Exactly. Music is that's why do we love music so much? Why has music been such a, you know, just a foundational part of human culture? It's because music automatically takes us out of our minds and takes us into experience that is pure, you know, and so that's why Bill uses music in his work, because music is that conduit that allows us to be present in this way, in ways that our minds and culture don't allow us, frankly, in other respects. But music is like one of the last holdouts, right? Where we can still have that kind of awareness and that kind of presence, and it's socially acceptable. All right, so he talks about his pure presence, bare of all internal commentaries, judgment, comparisons, fears, desires, such as the awareness I observe in a calmly newborn infant, an alert infant, whose tiny body sometimes seems reduced to just a pair of eyes, totally absorbed in sights that are still fresh, unlabeled, and unburdened by the weight of prior experience. I am tempted to say that such an infant is not only present, but that he is an embodiment of presence itself. The Taoists have the type of meditation called Zuo Wang, which is the meditation of forgetting, sitting in forgetting. So you forget everything that you know about yourself. You just allow yourself to be completely present. Centering prayer in the Christian tradition is the same way. We use the sacred word as a way of just letting everything else go. The sacred word is laid down in the consciousness. It displaces everything else. And then we can sit in that place of forgetting, of just pure presence. That's the whole point of what we're doing there. And the infant as an embodiment of presence itself reminds me of Jesus being the embodiment of the Father, the incarnation of the Father in human form. He is occupying that space, occupying that place, not just being present, but as an embodiment of presence itself. So he says a calm, alert newborn is present in this manner because he has no other choice. His experience is of necessity devoid of memories or previous similar experiences. Expectations of what this new experience should or should not be like, or desires of wanting it to end or to go on. The infant, without knowing it, is simply present to the miracle of being. Love that. And then eventually the infant is going to eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and it's all over, you know. And you can't go back, right? The way to the garden is barred by the cherubim with the flaming swords, you know. But that is our spiritual life, is to reclaim our essential nature. That is our essential nature, that kind of pure presence. That's who we really are. And in that space is the only way we'll ever experience again who we really are. And then once we do, we'll never be able to express it, because as soon as we do, we're out of it again. right? That's the weirdness about ineffability. And so, but trying to go back to the garden, Joni Mitchell was right. We got to get ourselves back to the garden. That's the whole deal here. But then when we do it, we're going to do it volitionally. We're going to be able to make the choice to do it. And that makes all the difference. Love without choice is not love. To be able to choose that state of awareness and presence is what makes it love. You know, the newborn has no choice. But as soon as it eats of the tree, then there's choice. That's why we have choice, right? So that we can love as the Father loves. That's the part of us that's created in the Father's image. Now he's going to get down to business. The adult has largely lost this capacity because he or she is so wrapped up in internal commentaries about this moment being interesting or boring, good or awful, about how well or how badly one is handling it. Oh, internal critic, right, Becky? Ooh, about what went on last night or about what one is going to do next. All of this thinking makes it impossible to be utterly, simply, and without distraction present to the moment. Indeed, here's Doug's line. Indeed, we are so accustomed to living like this that we rarely notice that anything is wrong. Sometimes when the internal voices grow raucous, attacking us or attacking our loved ones, when the boredom grows so intense that we can't bear to wait for tomorrow, or when the hopelessness lies so heavily upon us that we can no longer even contemplate tomorrow, then we know something is wrong. When the absence of presence grows this intense, we call it a disease. We give it a diagnosis. We offer a treatment. Duller, more daily lack, we simply call life. Perhaps that calmly alert newborn is inviting us to challenge this complacency. Wow, huh? That describe it for you? And hopefully that put a finer point, Doug. Doug is still here? There he is. Oh, he's off cam. Yeah, hopefully it puts a finer point on what we were talking about there, that we've got to be aware that something is wrong. When the absence of presence grows that intense, we call it a disease, give it a diagnosis, offer a treatment. But in its more, less intense variety, that duller, more daily lack of presence, we simply call that life. That's life to us, life that seems boring, unfulfilling, life that we can wish were something else. That's just not enough, right? We just call that life, but it's that same lack of presence that we're talking about. It just hasn't risen to the level that we're really going to actually focus on it and give it a priority. And so the newborns among us are the ones that are challenging this complacency. This is not a book about contemplation, but this section is one of the best sections on contemplation I think that you'll read. It's really putting the finger right on it. And there's so many parallels, of course, to Jesus all throughout all of this. Why did Jesus always focus on children? Why did he tell his handlers, you got to let the kids come to me. Don't keep them away from me, because such as these are kingdom. Sometimes that's translated, such as these belong to kingdom or inherit kingdom. No. The real translation is such as these are kingdom. Kingdom is that quality of life that is pure presence. That's what kingdom is. And we don't do that 24/7. We're going to oscillate, but we want to be characterized by kingdom, characterized by that kind of presence. And the children to Jesus were the mascots. They were the emblems. They were the symbol of what that looks like. And so he kept wanting to bring the adults back to the children. Try to experience the world through those eyes again. Try to remember what that was like. Can you drop all of that experience? Can you, for just a moment, cut through all that noise and just be with whatever is present to you with that kind of presence?
I think it's what we have discussed before too about awe. There's no sense of the self. It's just the awe and absorbing and observing everything. I want to share with you guys when I first came to the United States, I was 12, and my poor mother, we came from a third world country. Here's a woman with 4 kids She had to leave the two youngest one with the grandparents because we were like from 13 all the way down to the youngest was 2. So she couldn't handle 6. So she came with 4 kids. I was 12 at a time. From 13, my brother, till, I don't know, 9 or 8. But I remember being in the plane, landing in Honolulu. That was the port of entry at that time. Now it's LA, actually. But there was no sense of fear, no worries, just me and my siblings, just observing everything, absorbing everything. There was no fear, no worries, nothing. This is what's happening. You just go with the flow. And I remember that. But now I look back, all the fears and worries must have been with my mother. Because here's a woman who, her English is passable. But yeah, to navigate that by herself with these 4 kids. I mean, granted, we were not unruly then.
You weren't Americanized as yet.
Until we came to the United States.
You mean I can act like this?
Yeah, right. Whereas before you defer to the elders, you defer to authority. But yes, it was just that sense of there was no judgment. Now I look back, we were in Hawaii, but there was no sense of judgment. It was just the experience in absorbing everything and looking at the people and looking. But yeah, I think that's what it means.
That's fascinating. Think about the difference of the experience that you 4 kids had and the experience your mom was having. As you set it up,
course.
That's exactly what we're talking about.
Yeah.
Your mom gave you the luxury of the childhood that you had where you could feel that covered and able to just experience what you were.
Right. But that's also what I mean by the sense of trust. We trusted, she can, that's up to her. And we just there was no worries, nothing. Yeah.
Can any of you remember a time like that where you were just processing just purely what you were seeing? And it doesn't have to be from childhood, it can be from yesterday, but do you have an example in your life where you felt that kind of just pure involvement in what you were seeing? No labels, no inner chatter?
Well, I think going back to what Ellen was just talking about, when I'm in a foreign country and they're speaking a different language, like it's much more easy for me to be present. Even though I might still be thinking about the words in some ways, it's like the words are fascinating to me in a different way. Like they grab my attention in a different way.
Is it just because you're just hearing them phonetically? You're just hearing the sounds and you're not attaching any meaning yet? What is it, do you think?
I think some of that might be going on for sure, but just, as I'm listening to somebody talk, I'm paying attention to every word and I'm present to every word in a way that I'm not when I'm hearing English.
I get that. I remember being down in Mexico for weeks at a time and trying to immerse in the language, coming home every day with a huge headache. Because I was just, like you say, I was listening so hard. There was nothing else in my mind but the speaker and what they were saying and trying to understand. Now, there was that level of trying to understand, and then trying to formulate any kind of response to just be in the conversation in any way. And so there was a level where I'm stepped back from the type of pure experience Ellen is talking about, but it is a step toward it as well. Anyone else? You must
have those experiences on occasion sitting outside and kind of tapping into that meditative part of me, where I'm basically letting the thoughts not have any import and not following them. And sometimes I feel the grass, and what gets me the most is the way trees move. I don't know what it is about trees. When they're just kind of doing their thing, but it just captures me. and that's it. I'm into the tree. And I'm not thinking about it. I'm just kind of feeling the sway and feeling the presence of them and thinking how magical it is that they're kind of together in this thing. So sometimes I feel that.
Is that when you're having a Rocky Mountain High?
Yes, but not really. No high involved, but
Yeah.
Oh, come on. Psychedelics are great for presence.
I just haven't been there yet.
Here we go, Bill. Bill, you got to have some experience like that with music.
Mhm.
Can you relate one to us?
Well, the obvious one starts even before the music starts, because you know in that moment before the conductor drops the baton that your invitation is like right there. How much can you let go before the baton falls? And if you can, you're off on presence, like right from the start.
That's great. I love that.
The space between, right?
Mm-hmm. The space between the spaces.
Okay, so years ago, when I was in my teens, I was in a tribute band where I was singing, playing bass, and I had, well, Moog Taurus pedals in front of me, and I was doing all that. And we had practiced over and over again, and we finally played this one gig in front of about 500 people. And halfway through a verse, it's like I left my body and my hands were still playing. I was still singing. And it was kind of like I went, what's going on here? Oh, wow, this is cool. And then all of a sudden, whoop, I came right back in. And so I remember that. That was pretty wild. I went, holy cow, astral projection or something? I don't know. But yeah, but it was great. I mean, it was just like, I moved away from my body for a second. It was just like, whoa, look at this. You know, and
Wow.
I was like, it was like I was watching myself for a second, you know.
Yeah.
Anyway,
it's nice.
I have less spectacular experiences like that on Sunday mornings when we play. You know, typically my eyes are closed and we're playing, and it's like I'm inside this space and I hear all the other players in that space. So to my right is Joe, to my left is Vernon, and then further on down to my left is Dave, and then Bill, you know, all in their space. And I'm hearing everything that they're playing. I'm hearing the choices that they make. I'm hearing, you know, I'm feeling my own instrument. I'm hearing the choices I'm making. But kind of the way Eric is describing it, it's almost like I'm watching myself and everything else within this space, kind of like planets in a solar system spinning around and making these choices and just inside the music. And so on a good morning when I'm really in that worship space and I really let myself go, it gets like that. And it's just, there are no words, you know, even if I'm singing, you know, and I'm singing words, it's not like I'm even hearing the words so much. If I have to look at the sheet music, I look at the music, but it's like I'm seeing the whole page at once and it's directing me, but not specifically. It's a different kind of experience, but it's approaching what it is we're talking about here because I'm not processing intellectually the way I normally do.
And I think we hear that, right? When you're in that song, like I think the audience gets there with you.
Ideally, yes. Yes. You know, that to me is what leading worship is all about. You know, it's going there. You know, it's not directing traffic, it's going there. And then whoever wants to follow can follow. But that's what it's all about. Danielle, you must have had those experiences as well, of course. Yeah, she's shaking her head. Yeah. I know that we all have, even those of you who are remaining silent, you know, you've had these experiences. And if they're not coming immediately to mind, think about it. You know, think about those moments. You know, it can be something as simple as a sunset that takes your breath away. You know, it can be anything that's intense enough that it just takes us out of ourselves. And then it could be something that's seemingly insignificant. It's just watching that hummingbird and the way that they hover and the way that they move, and you're just mesmerized by it. And then you realize all these moments have gone by and you weren't thinking about anything. You were just connected, and then it flies away and then you're suddenly thinking about it again, you know. But those kind of moments are those moments of pure presence, without which you can't be present to anything else. As long as we're thinking, as long as we're labeling and categorizing, we are not present. We're only present to our noodles. And this is what we're trying to balance life with, is that contemplative place. And the infant is our symbol. The infant is our guide in that, even though we're not going to go back to being that 24/7. All right. I think that's a good place to stop, and we'll pick it up here next time. Another great discussion, everyone. Thanks for playing along. All right, where'd he go? Scotty? There you are. You are muted, my friend.
Thank you, Father God, for this time together and things we learn and we share and explore what's possible and created things and imaginary things and all aspects of our life. And what a grand adventure it can be. We appreciate it, Lord, and we love you, and we thank you for allowing us to experience your creation. It's in your name, Lord Jesus, that we pray and we give our thanks and we say our amens. Amen.
Amen. Thanks, Scott. Thanks, everybody. All right, we'll see you Sunday.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
Good night, good night.
Bye. Good night.
And Jordana, good night, dear.
All right, see you Sunday.
See you Sunday. Eric, hopefully we'll see you Sunday as well. If you can.
Oh, you might, Rabbit, you might. Yeah.
Oh, that would be great.
Okay,
Cheers. Man. Be well.
Okay. You as well. Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Bye.